Alright, what's up everyone? Today I'm going to look at Capture One and how it's going to handle film scans. This particular scan, I shot this about 2 or 3 years ago now. This is a 4x5 film scan of Fuji Velvia 100. This is a transparency film or slide film, and since it's a 4x5 scan, it's a huge file. So this is literally the raw scan from the FlexTight scanner from Hasselblad. RGB 16-bit output, and this is the TIFF raw scan again. You can even see the film border. It's literally straight off the scanner. And this is about a 1 GB sized file. So this file is pretty massive. So let's check out performance really quick. So I'm going to zoom in 1:1 and look at all that detail. So the software's keeping up. There is a little bit of a small rendering as far as image population on the screen, but it is actually keeping up. There's no pauses or latency as far as loading or responsiveness, I should say. So I'm going to go in 2:1 now, and I'm using Navigator. This looks pretty darn good. So details are preserved. The scan looks great. Everything looks nice and detailed, nice and sharp, clear. I'm going 300% just for giggles, and wow, that's actually pretty darn good. So only reason why I would be in 3:1 is probably for spotting, obviously, and I'm going to get to that in a second. But no latency. The software's not breaking. There's no hiccups. It's not trying to keep up with me. It's actually doing very, very well, especially, given the size of this file, which is 1 GB. It's a very large file, but that's typically what you get when you shoot 4x5 and you scan it. So I'm going to do some global corrections really quick just to get those out of the way. So this is the raw scan, and notice how flat it is. I typically scan flat just for preservation of details, and I prefer slightly flatter images. So I'm going to use levels here, and levels to me is by far probably the most important tool for editing film scans. And the fact that it's native to Capture One, and I don't have to, go to Photoshop, use levels, and then go to Capture One. I don't have a two-step or two software workload. It's in Capture One natively, so that's awesome. That's always great. It keeps me in Capture One, and so that's a pretty good starting point. So I'm looking at my graph here in my curves panel, and I've got a pretty decent amount of information. Nothing's clipping. I'm gonna turn on exposure warning. Nothing is clipping. Okay, so now I'm going to color correct a little bit. That magenta cast, that is just a product of slide film in general. They usually kick more towards magenta. They kick pretty hard, but that's typical. And let's see, 239, 240, 240, 242, 244. That's not bad. I'm going to increase my Kelvin just a little bit. Go back here to my neutral point. 249, 251, 251. So that's about a 2-point difference. That is not terrible. I'm going to maybe a 0.1 adjustment was made to my tint slider. So that's pretty neutral to me. So now I do have some magenta casting down here in this field area. And the benefit of Capture One is that you have layers built in. So I don't have to go to Photoshop to do any selective adjustments, and I can put my selective adjustments in layers. Now you can make selective adjustments in Lightroom. However, you don't have the benefit of layers. I think layers just makes this much more powerful, especially when making a selective adjustment here. So I'm going to add a gradient, linear gradient, sorry, to this section here. If I press the M key, I'm going to turn the masking on, and it's going to show me what it's going to affect. Now I know that this lower part of the image is a little bit more magenta than, say, the rest of it. So I'm going to further dial back the magenta here. And it's looking a lot more even and a lot more consistent with the rest of it. And for time's sake, I'm just going to leave it there. But on, off, on. So yeah, pretty powerful stuff. And it's pretty easy too, and it's pretty intuitive. I'm going to zoom out here just very quick. This is before and after. That's looking very good. That's looking beautiful. I still have a little bit of magenta going on over here. I can take that out or fix it if need be. But you know what? Let's do that really quick. Let's go ahead and take care of this. Because if I don't, the more I stare at it, it's going to bug me, and I'm sure it'll probably bug you as well. And that's looking pretty neutral. So that means I gotta go back in here. Match this up. Cool, that's looking even. That is looking very good. So I'm gonna zoom out here. And I could even go as far as using the advanced tools that's in Capture One, which is the color balance tools. And these are very, very, very powerful, and they can be extremely complex, but once you get to know them, once you get to, this is the three-way panel, but you can obviously have a master panel, shadow, midtone, highlight. You also have this in, obviously, curves, if you understand color theory. You have your individual red, green, and blue channels. You have your highlight or your white point, your whitest whites or your whitest blues, I should say. And then, across all three channels. And Luma is something that you don't have in Lightroom. You don't have in Camera Raw. It's only in Photoshop. And it's not immediately apparent. You would have to make your curves adjustment and then play with your blending modes to get the same effect as this, which is already natively built in. And this is extremely useful because this is another reason why I use Photoshop, and I even keep Photoshop. Because in my workflow, there's often times where I need to decrease or increase contrast ever so slightly. But to get my point across, I'm going to make a very dramatic S-curve. And you know what? I'm working in layers, and I need to make sure I'm on my background layer. Okay, there we go. So I'm on my background layer. I'm going to make a very dramatic S-curve really quick. And notice how punchy and how saturated this got. That's because I'm editing across all channels, red, green, and blue. Now, this is typical. This is how curves has always worked. I'm going to reset this. And this is what I love about Luma. Luma, or luminosity, basically, is adjusting the lightness or darkness or playing with contrast on a global scale without affecting color. I'm not increasing my saturation when I play with this. That's something that is just, it's something I use all the time, almost on every single image in Photoshop. And the fact that I don't have to leave Capture One to do this, that's awesome. So you're affecting contrast without affecting color. And this is extremely handy, especially when you're editing skin or any image basically. And this right here is more than enough reason to just not even use Photoshop. But let's see the retouching tools, which is what most people are concerned about with Capture One, and if it's even comparative to that of Photoshop's healing tools. So this is 100%. Now when I'm spotting, I don't do 100%, I go to 200%. So this is typically what I'm looking at when I'm spotting. Now I'm going to use the healing mask tool, which is about the same thing as Photoshop's spot healing brush or spot healing tool. So it's about the same thing. So I'm going to start, notice I haven't created a new layer yet. I'm still on my background layer. But when I start spotting, it creates a heal layer for me automatically. And to be honest, this tool in Capture One is very comparable to Photoshop's spot healing tool. And notice the speed. It's not, I don't have any sort of hiccup. Anybody who's spotted a 4x5 sheet of film can attest that when you're using Photoshop and you're in your zone and you're spotting and you know, you're just in that zone. When you're working, sometimes the software will freeze, and when you go to make your next spot, it spots the entire path that you just laid out. And that's not what you want to do. That's the software trying to keep up with what you're doing. Here I don't have that issue, so I'm spotting away and it's keeping up with me. And this is a gigabyte file. This is a very extensive file, and I don't have any sort of hiccup really, and it's pretty insane. And I just went from the top of the image, like the sky, all the way to the floor or to the grassy field from the navigator, and it was perfectly fine. Now, obviously, I'm kind of like loosely spotting here. I'm not making, smart decisions when spotting, but obviously I would take my time. But this is just a sheer performance little test. And the actual spots themselves are done fairly well. I would say pretty damn well. Like this is good. I'm more than pleasantly surprised on how well this is working with such a big file. But the spotting in general, or the software plugging in or getting rid of those spots, is actually doing very, 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 very well. And that right there was something I'm kind of curious about. So notice that spot. So I'm going to undo that. I'm going to zoom in on this really quick, because this is kind of a difficult spot. So I'm going to undo that. So this is 300% right now. We're in at 3-1. This little spot right here starts from the mountain edge into the sky, back to the mountain edge. And that right there, yes, at 300%, you're going to notice something, but that right there is a clean enough line. It's a pretty clean line to where, it's unnoticeable. And that's what you want when you're spotting. You don't want something that, screams, hey, something was done here. You know what I mean? So I'm fairly surprised, and I'm happy with the performance as far as, the software knowing what to fix and where to get the source from. Because this is essentially what looks like a cloning mask, but done automatically without you setting a source point. And it's doing a very, very, very good job. So, and the software's keeping up. I mean, I'm going around here and I'm kind of, being careless a little bit, but you get the idea. So I think I'll probably spot some more different negatives, or spend some more time testing out the spot tool, because honestly, as far as what I've seen so far and what I've tested, this is good enough to where I can feel comfortable and just getting rid of the Adobe Creative Cloud suite, because Photoshop is a very bloated program for what I use it for. I only use it for small fine-tuning color corrections. Capture One covers those, extensively covers those, in fact. And the only other reason is spotting negatives or spotting film. And this has proven to, be suffice enough to just kick Photoshop to the curb, because that is a very bloated software for what I am using it for. And I'm not a, skin retoucher. However, Capture One, if I ever need to, has a very good and intuitive skin editor. And, you know, it's intuitive enough where I'm not a whole, I don't do the frequency separation thing. I don't spend my time doing that kind of work. But Capture One actually makes it easier for you to do so if that's your thing. So it's kind of like future proofing in a way, where I feel comfortable enough to just full on make the full switch, especially with the way, Adobe Camera Raw and Lightroom render Fuji files with that worm artifacting and how that's not going away anytime soon. But I will say, and I will not discredit Adobe, they did try to fix it. There is a small, actually not small, it's actually a huge or big workaround for it, but it's also a major, major inconvenience. So they do provide the enhanced details feature, and I'm pretty sure some of you who shoot Fuji may have looked into this. It does make a copy of your file, and it does its own sharpening rendition for details to minimize the artifacting. It doesn't get rid of it, it just minimizes it. It's still there, and it creates a copy of the photo or file into a DNG. And that DNG, I think, is bigger than your initial raw file. So if you're shooting, 24 exposures and you have to do the enhanced details because you shoot Fuji, your 24 turns into 48. And you're just doubling the space that you're taking up, and that's just unacceptable to me. So this is looking like a viable and sustainable solution as far as, digital work is concerned with Fuji files. So I'm extremely happy with the digital rendering for Fuji files, and now this is serving to be a very, 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 very capable replacement to Photoshop. Obviously, I mean, this is nowhere, this image I would say is 60, 70% there already as far as it being completed. Obviously, there's still work to be done, I think, but this is a pretty damn good, like, almost finished product. And this is all in one software. I didn't jump from software to software. I didn't go to Photoshop. I just did it all in Capture One. I didn't have to leave Capture One. It does what I need it to do. It does everything I ever wanted it to do. So layers, again, very powerful, built into Capture One. You got levels built into Capture One, very powerful. So things are not looking too good for Lightroom and Adobe as far as I'm concerned. But I will continue to test this. So if you're curious to how it's going to work with your film scans, I think it's great. I think this is, very, 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 very good. And I could even, go to my green channel right here because I can see some magenta in my highlights a little bit. I can probably bring those down or bring my greens back up just to make a minute adjustment here. And Capture One makes it very, very easy to make minute adjustments. Now, if I go in 1:1, and this is why I like this slider, I'm going to find somewhere where there's a good amount of oh, here we go. So, yes, there's magenta in my highlights here, a little bit too much. And with the slider, I can see precisely before and after. But let's say you're not a big fan of the before and after slider and you just want the full view, before or after. There's a thing. You can definitely choose either or. And I particularly like the split view slider because I want to see what's happening, especially if I'm in here. I want to see what's going on. But yes, so hopefully this gives you a better idea of how Capture One handles your film scans if you choose to give it a try, which I always highly recommend that, at least give it a try. It's free for 30 days. and see if you like it. So yeah, that's Capture One in film scans. Hope this helped you out.